I know this is going to be a significant disappointment for many of you, but I am not going to preach a sermon tonight. I thought I heard a smattering of applause there. Those of you who've been with us through the season of Advent, and you know that we have been going through a teaching series we call Origin, where we've been talking about the different birth stories, or the origin stories of Jesus that are in the Gospels. We talked about, Matthew having that very Jewish gospel, and Luke being the gospel written to the outsiders, and John's gospel, where he really wants us to understand that this one in the manger is the Word of God. It is God in the flesh. And I suppose you could say, in some ways, what we're going to be doing here in the next few minutes is a continuation of that series. We're going to take a different look at how it is that Jesus came into this world, but we're going to do this through a reader's theater entitled Henry the Angel in Training. I've got some friends that are going to help me with this, so if you guys would come on up front. And this is a story that some of you know. This is my second career, and my first career was I was in advertising, and what got me into advertising was this. I'll date myself here. I was an illustrator, and this was back in the day before there were computer graphics and all these things, and they still needed people to do illustrations for ads and handwritten ads. But one of the things I did later in that career was I did some writing as well. And my intent was to, I wrote this story, and my intent was to illustrate this and publish this as a children's book. And it did not happen. I just never got around to doing the illustrations, and now that's been about, this story's about 20 years old. And so I'm very, very rusty now. And so as we're getting closer to Christmas, and I was thinking about what I want to share tonight, I thought it might be kind of fun to get this out. And I went through and I rewrote it so that it's in the form of a reader's theater, so it wasn't just solid narration, and you got to hear some other voices. So this is really kind of the first time I'm getting to hear the story this way as well. But this is, kind of a different view of how it may have gone, that what events transpired to bring Jesus into the world. And this is Henry, the Angel in Training.
The way you would picture it. The streets are paved with gold, harp music never goes out of style, and everyone is polite and well-behaved. Well, everyone except Henry, that is. Henry was a nice enough boy, but he had a penchant for doing things his way. His way generally ended poorly. The AIT on Henry's shirt stood for Angel in Training, although the other AIT students would tell you that for Henry, it meant always in trouble. Henry had lots of big ideas and little time for taking direction from others. It would be easy to say that Henry spoke more often than he listened. Today would be no exception. Angel Training School was in session, and the student body floated in their normal positions in the main hall. Like every other week, this one started with God leading students through his Will of Me class. It also started with Henry talking during the lecture to his best friend Claire.
Claire, if I don't get picked this year, I think I'll simply burst.
Claire was doing her best to listen to God's lesson and nod to Henry at the same time. Although she wasn't giving him her full attention, Claire knew that Henry was once again talking about that AIT mission trip. Each year, one student was selected to go into the world to complete an important mission for God. The chosen student is paired with an experienced angel for guidance, observation, and grading. Henry couldn't think of anyone more qualified than himself.
I tell you, Claire, I'm quick-witted, a natural-born floater, and I glow better than anyone in our class.
On a roll, Henry continued confidently.
Gabriel's my mentor. He's God's #1 angel. That should mean something.
As Henry rambled on, the class drew to a close. Claire interpreted Henry as the angel Gabriel appeared next to God.
I wonder what he's doing here.
Then them saw it, a golden envelope. A golden envelope could only mean one thing. Whenever God had an important mission to be fulfilled, he would give directions in a golden envelope to one of his angels. The fact that Gabriel was selected for the job meant it was of the greatest importance.
Claire, it looks like I've got the mission that I've been waiting for.
What do you mean that's Gabriel's mission? Besides, you don't even know what it is.
I've got a plan. Tonight, when I turn in my miracles homework to Gabriel, I'll take a peek inside the golden envelope. Once I find out what the mission is, I'll take care of it before Gabriel has a chance to act. When I've completed the mission, God will see what an industrious guy I am. If this is as big as I think it is, I'll be made a full-fledged angel before you know it.
That evening, Henry set his plan into motion. After giving his homework to Gabriel, Henry slipped away and nervously looked about the angel's home while Claire kept the angel busy with small talk. Within minutes, Henry found the golden envelope. And opened it. There were more pages than he had expected. He knew that he would have to glance through the pages quickly before he was caught. Henry expected the mission to be big, but this was incredible. Reading quickly, his heart raced as he put the pages back into the envelope. As they left the angel's home, Henry talked excitedly about the contents of the mysterious envelope.
Claire, this is big. No, make that huge. Remember in our prophecy class how we were taught that God would send his son into the world? This mission is to make preparations for his earthly birth. Claire, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm off to Bethlehem.
Claire couldn't believe her ears either. Sure, she was stunned by the magnitude of the mission. She was really impressed that Henry remembered one of their lessons. After arriving in Bethlehem, it took Henry some time to adjust to the world outside of heaven. Many things were similar, but nothing glowed, and of course no one floated. He knew that he would have to act fast and get back home before he was missed. Henry had read through the mission papers quickly, and was only able to remember the highlights of the assignment. He knew that God's son was to be born in Bethlehem to a couple named Joseph and Mary. It was all the other details that were starting to get a little blurry. Henry remembered reading something about the couple having trouble finding a place to stay. Scratching his head, Henry did what came natural to him, doing things his way. It made sense to Henry that God's son deserved the biggest and most lavish birth ever. Henry worked feverishly, accomplishing a great deal in a short amount of time. First, he booked a luxury suite for Joseph and Mary. Next, he arranged to have the newborn child serenaded by Bethlehem's finest singers and musicians. Finally, Henry sent all the local reporters to the suite to cover the birth. Only one thing was missing: Joseph and Mary. Henry was at a complete loss. He had no idea how to find Joseph and Mary. For that matter, he had no idea what they looked like. One thing was for sure: Henry thought better on a full stomach. After making his way into a local restaurant, Henry ordered the only thing that sounded familiar to him: angel food cake. And then considered his next move. As he sat and thought, with absolutely nothing coming to mind, Henry heard a man talking to a small group at a near table.
Mary's time is drawing near. It could be any day now.
We've all looked forward to this birth, Joseph.
Henry couldn't believe his good fortune.
I really am cut out for this angel stuff.
Henry approached the table of men.
Joseph, there's no time for questions.
Handing him the key to the luxury suite, he vigorously ordered,
Take Mary at once so that she may give birth.
Henry made his return to heaven much faster than he had expected. His quick work and seeming good fortune kept swirling through his head. Henry was on cloud 16. Being a boy of his own mind, Henry felt like cloud 9 had often been misjudged as the best cloud, so that's... Anyway, surely no angel, let alone an angel in training, could have handled this assignment any better.
Won't Gabriel be impressed when he finds out what I've done?
Impressed wasn't the word that Gabriel used when he spoke to Henry. It was truly unfortunate. Just as Henry was soaring to the high point of his tale of earthly conquest, Gabriel interrupted him with a minor problem. Actually, a major problem. Henry had talked to the wrong Joseph.
The real Joseph and his wife Mary are still on the road to Bethlehem.
Henry's stomach turned. The singers, the musicians, and all the reporters that he had so cleverly coordinated had been sent to the wrong place. Even worse, Henry thought the suite occupied by the mystery Joseph was the last available room in Bethlehem. Thanks to Henry, God's son had no one to witness his birth and no place to be born. Henry's first instinct was to do something, anything, to fix the problem he had created. Surely there was a way to undo the damage before it was too late, before God found out what he had done. Oh, who was Henry kidding? God knows everything. For the first time in his life, doubt crept into Henry's thoughts. The glow of his halo faded along with his usual swagger. There would be no crowning victory for Henry this day, and surely no AIT mission trip in his future. Henry had messed up the most important assignment that God would ever give an angel. If only he had read the directions in the golden envelope more carefully, none of this would have happened.
All is not lost, Henry. There is still hope, but you must follow my instructions perfectly.
Displaying the golden envelope in his hand, Gabriel explained that there was more to the mission than Henry had read. There was one last task that must be fulfilled. His eyes grew wide as Gabriel instructed him,
Do not be afraid.
It was nighttime, and the air was cool as Henry reappeared on earth. He was a short distance outside of Bethlehem. At his feet were a group of sleeping shepherds. He was nervous, and his stomach was in knots. Filled with fear, Henry could barely muster a decent glow, and floating didn't feel the least bit natural. He knew this was his last chance. But what could a dimly lit, barely floating angel in training say or do that would get these men to leave their flock? Henry searched his brain for the right thing to say. Sweat poured from his brow as he strained to make his lips move. The words of encouragement that Gabriel spoke to him kept running through his mind. Do not be afraid. Henry closed his eyes and prayed that God would give him the right words and the courage to say to them. Suddenly, a warm feeling filled Henry with the confidence to speak as the words,
Do not be afraid.
slipped from Henry's mouth. The night sky was illuminated by an unearthly glow. Henry glanced over his shoulder. Glowing like the morning sun was Claire and the entire class of angels in training. Turning back to the shepherds, Henry continued to speak.
I bring you good news of great joy.
His work complete, Henry returned to heaven. He rejoined Gabriel, who was looking down upon Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, the newborn Son of God. Henry looked down at the baby lying in a hay-filled manger, surrounded by little more than the smells and sounds of barnyard animals. A tear came to his eye.
I really blew it this time.
That's not how God sees it. Things worked out exactly the way they were supposed to.
But how? I messed everything up.
God's will is perfect, Henry. God can use our gifts and sometimes even our faults to bring about his works. The baby Jesus was to be born in a lowly manger with few witnesses and no fanfare. Your actions ensured that there were no witnesses except for the shepherds. When you looked and booked the last empty room in town for the other Joseph, God's plan was complete.
The other Joseph? I forgot about him.
In a fabulous hotel room on the nicer side of Bethlehem, music filled the air, reporters stood with notepads in hand, and a steady stream of curious onlookers pushed through the door to fill the room. No one was for certain why they were here, but they knew it must be for something big. The world had spread throughout the gathering that some kind of memorable birth was about to take place. Just when the entire room seemed on the verge of exploding, the other Joseph suddenly appeared before the crowd. Beaming with pride, he shared his joy with the gathering. Mary, His prize cow had just given birth to a baby calf.
I think we'll name him Henry.
The end.